This is an example of a quilt, a pattern that I'm going to use, and the start and end point are not at the top or at the bottom. They're about halfway in between, and I'm going to show you how that I'm going to do my relocate. First, I have this set up in the edge-to-edge mode, and then I'm going to get out of the edge-to-edge mode, and I'm going to convert this to a repeat patterns edge-to-edge. And then as I quilt and roll, I can't use the start point or the end point to do the relocate as I normally do. So I'm going to show you another method of doing this. I have clicked quilt and let the machine go to the start point of the first repeat in the first row. Now I'm going to click stop, and I'm going to get a message that says, okay, you haven't finished quilting all the pattern in this band. Are you sure you want to stop? And yes, I do. Now I still have my boundary, and I'm going to convert this to a repeat patterns edge to edge. I'll just right click somewhere on the screen, and when it comes up you select relocate, shift alt to one point. I'll follow the instructions on the screen. It says using relocate relocate all converts this quilt group from edge to edge to repeat patterns. Do you want to finish your in repeat patterns? Yes, I do. Click yes. Now it's going to tell me to click on a known point on the CAD. I will turn on the endpoint snap so that I can snap to the end point of the start point here of the first repeat in this first row. I'll zoom in so we can see. I have this zoomed in pretty good. I'm going to put my mouse cursor right on this start point and left click. Then I'm going to follow the instructions, and I'm going to click yes. I am now in repeat patterns edge to edge. Everything on the screen, all the repeats in all the rows are black, and I know that I can't quilt but one row because you can see my boundary that I have set. So when I get to the end of this first row and it does a tie off, I will pull up the bobbin thread, cut the threads. I will click OK, and as soon as the machine starts to move to the start point of this next row, I will click stop, and I will click stop again. We will see that when I get to the end of this first row. I have deleted the old boundary and made myself a new boundary because I want to be able to click points right along this left edge and also right along the right edge so I can see exactly where the edge of the quilt lies. I did make a small adjustment to this left side to bring this closer to the edge of the quilt, and I'm going to make a small adjustment to the right side because this part of the pattern is a little bit beyond the edge where I want it to stitch. I have corrected that to fall within the edge of the boundary, and now I'll quilt out this first row. Previously, I would not do a lot of boundaries, especially if I'm doing edge to edge and repeat patterns. I would simply move the machine to the edge of the quilt, and I would adjust the pattern to fit within that line that the vertical crosshair makes. But I found that making a boundary gives me a more precise area to adjust the pattern to fit. I have saved this project, and when I get to a point where I have a good project to save, I will save it in case something happens and I need to go back and reload that project. I have quilted the first row. I'm at the end of row 1. It tells me to cut the bobbin thread and click OK. I'm going to do that. The bobbin thread has been cut. I'm going to click OK. The machine is going to start to move, and as soon as it starts to move, I'm going to click stop and then click stop again. Now the reason I did this was because where the start point of row 2 is located, I cannot reach that point. Here's the start point of row 2. There's the bottom edge of my boundary near the belly bar. So I would bang the belly bar if I didn't hit stop. I'm going to roll the quilt, and then I'm going to show you how to do the relocate to get started for the next quilting area. I have the quilt rolled, and I'm going to use this point of this leaf to do my relocate. I will zoom in on that very, very close, and I'll use that point to do the relocate. The needle is sitting right at this point. I'm going to right click, shift relocate, shift alt to one point. I'm going to click on this point. Now this is not as sharp a point as I'd like to use, but it'll work. Then I will follow the instructions. I click yes. It's going to realign all of the patterns, and I'm going to get rid of this boundary and make a new one. Well, yes, I make errors every once in a while. You can notice that when I did my relocate, that my pattern did not line up with the boundary. Well, this should have lined up with the old boundary if I would have done it correctly. But if you notice down at the bottom, I have end snap turned on, and when I right click and select relocate, shift alt to one point, this thing is going to want to snap to that point right there. And if I go up here and try to grab this point, notice that I am already snapped to the start point of this first repeat in row 1. And when I did all of that, and I clicked this point, clicked the known point, and then I clicked yes, it shifted everything into the wrong place. So how am I going to correct it? Well, I'm going to turn off the end snap. Now I'm going to do relocate, shift all to one point, and since I have all of that and it says click the known point, I'm going to click this point of this leaf right there, and then I'll click yes, and everything should line up if I have done this correctly. Now notice that the patterns are inside of the boundary area the way they're supposed to be. It's all lined up like it's supposed to be. The patterns are inside the boundary. I can see where the belly bar is. I can see I can quilt this row. This line tells me the bottom edge, well, it's a little above the bottom edge of the row I just finished, but I can see that I will not have any problem where the machine is located. I quilt this next row because that's all the way against the take-up roller, and my pattern is below that point, so I will not have any problems quilting this. As I quilt and roll, I'll follow the same procedure over and over to quilt these next rows. I did delete the boundary and made a new boundary just so that I could show you how the pattern lies in here. I'm going to make a small correction to this edge. I've moved the pattern out slightly right along this edge of the quilt, and I'll do the same on the right side. And on the right side, the pattern is out a little bit beyond where I want it to be, so I'm going to move this in. And I have all the repeats in that row selected, so you'll never notice the small adjustment that I make. I have this adjusted the way that I want it to be, Now I would like for this end point to be out a little bit, right along this 1/4 inch seam line. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go down Divide Pattern, and I'm going to divide this. I've zoomed way in, and I'm going to divide it right at this point right there. This little line that goes out to the end point is black, and all the rest of it is in the still in divide. I'm going to escape and get out of the divide mode. Now I will click left click to select this line. Now I have that line selected, and what I'm going to do now is just turn on the end snap. Have to click through these, make sure I stop at the right one. I have the end snap turned on, and all I'm going to do is grab this box at the top, and I'm going to pull it out. Come on, stay selected. I have this pulled out. I'm going to pull this out right so that it's right there along the 1/4 inch binding line, and then when the quilt is bound, that end point where the tie stitches are will be in the binding area, and you will never see it. I finished another row of quilting, and this time I'm going to try to do this relocate so that it works out correctly. I have the end snap turned off, and I have the needle sitting right at the point of this leaf, and I'm going to do a relocate again. I will right click, choose relocate, shift all to one point. Now I'm going to click my mouse, left click, right on the point of this leaf. Then when it comes up, I'll click yes. After Grave Studio finishes, now you can see that when I do this way, it actually shifts the next row, the next pattern area, up into the boundary that I previously had drawn. And if I'm satisfied with this, I can leave it this way. And I need to make a small adjustment on this side of the quilt, and again on the right side of the quilt. I selected all 3 rows of unquilted pattern, and I adjusted the left side and the right side to fit within that boundary the way I want it to. I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to measure the quilt, the actual quilt top. I'm going to measure from the top of this pattern all the way to the bottom of the quilt. Now here's how I'll do that. I will align the crosshair with the top edge of this pattern, and that looks pretty good right there. All I need to do now is measure the amount of quilt top remaining, and then over here I have 49.21 inches, and I'll adjust the pattern on the screen to fit the measurement of the remaining quilt to be quilted. I have slightly over 48 inches of quilt top, so I'm going to decrease the amount of pattern that I have left to quilt. I'm doing this over 3 rows over 48 inches, so this adjustment that I make is not going to be noticeable. I have adjusted it now to 48.17, and I'm going to leave it at that point. I see all the time where people post on the list that they have either they don't have enough pattern at the bottom of the quilt, or they have too much pattern at the bottom of the quilt. Now, if you do this procedure, you will never face that circumstance. I'm at the end of this quilt, and I have, as I rolled, I kept checking the amount of pattern that was left to quilt and the amount of quilt that was remaining, and I continued to adjust my pattern to fit the amount of quilt. And you can see it's only going to take a small adjustment here at the bottom to get this pattern, and this is the way you should end up. I'm going to adjust this repeat a little bit, and I'm going to adjust this repeat, and I'll probably move this bottom just slightly. The pattern is all adjusted to fit inside my boundary, and I did delete the old boundary and drew this new boundary along the bottom edge and up each and along each side, so that I would know exactly where I needed to place the pattern for this last run across the quilt. Now, I'm a firm believer that you should never have too much or too little pattern when you get to the bottom of your quilt. And if you will continue to check the amount of quilt remaining and also the amount of unquilted pattern remaining, you will never have that problem at the bottom of the quilt. I hope that someone gets a little bit of information out of this video.